When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to episode 28 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snelling's Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. I'm excited to welcome a fellow PI lawyer on the podcast today. Our guest is a partner at his firm, Ben Glass Law, where he helps injury victims in Virginia and Maryland. He's also an expert marketer and serves as the president of Great Legal Marketing. He has his own podcast, Time Freedom for Lawyers, which explores how high-income professionals can move away from 60-hour work weeks, reclaim their time, and spend it how they want. And if all that wasn't enough, our guest is also a marathon runner and coaches his 3 boys in baseball, soccer, and more. Brian, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast.
And the great thing is when you get to be in your upper 30s, you can spread out all of the things that you've done into a bio. You don't have to do them all at once anymore.
Exactly, right? I remember putting together my bio when I was just out of law school, and I was like, I haven't done anything. And so it really focused on my interests and, what I hope to accomplish as opposed to things I've actually done.
I still feel that way. It's funny. And I think it's high achieving, driven people. Like you always feel that way. You're in a room where somebody else has done more, and you always feel like whatever you've done isn't important enough to put on a bio.
It's funny too, because just this morning I was doing a Peloton run, right? And my instructor was Matt Wilpers, and he was talking about, competing with yourself. He said, hey, look, there is always going to be somebody faster than you, and there's always going to be somebody slower than you. So just work on yourself. Just compete with yourself. And so when it comes to writing bios, I always look at it in terms of, hey, look, in terms of the gap in the gain, right? Let's look back. Hey, what all have we accomplished? What all is really cool that we've been able to accomplish so far, as well as, hey, what do I hope to accomplish in the future? I know you operate that same way.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to keep track of this stuff that you've done, right? So one of the things that I started doing within the last couple of years is just at the end of every week, writing down 3 good things that happen, so that when you have a bad week or you have a bad month, you've got this history that you can look back at and say, okay, it's not all rain clouds, right? There were 3 good things that happened to me every single week in the last year.
Yeah, and on those great weeks, it's hard to come up with just 3, right? You're having to narrow it down. I do the same thing. I try to do 3 a day. And we both use the same kind of journal, the time planning journal. I put it in that bottom left quadrant, and I try to come up with 3 things a day that we were able to accomplish. And it's really fun at the end of the quarter when I move into the new journal to go back to the old one and look at all of the things that we've been able to accomplish either at home or at work or just personally. Yeah,
I love that, man.
Yeah. So, Brian, you are in Fairfax, Virginia. Give us a little background on you. Where were you? Where'd you grow up? School? All those kind of good things.
I did this the other day, and my background was like I had a totally normal childhood, and what you recognize is that nothing is normal, right? So I was born and raised in Fairfax, Virginia. I'm the oldest of 9 kids, which seemed normal enough to me at the time, but I guess it is not.
No.
But let's see, went to school at James Madison University and graduated law school from William & Mary. So all Virginia schools. And then when I got out of law school, I practiced for about 4 months, long enough for a cup of coffee at a general practice firm, billing by the hour, and decided that I hated it before transitioning over into our world, which is personal injury, contingency fee-based work. I spent the first 10 years of my career really across town, actually competing with my dad before joining him in the beginning of 2019 at Ben Glass Law. And now I run the auto accident practice here.
And so I'm going to back you up a little bit. Growing up with 9 kids, what number are you?
I'm number 1.
Number 1. Okay. So
both in ranking and in terms of birth order.
Okay. All right. Of course you are, right? Never going to give anyone else the satisfaction of giving up that number 1 ranking. So growing up with 8 siblings, all younger than you, how do you think that affected you in terms of your mindset and kind of where you are today?
Yeah, that's interesting. So the first thing I would say is I didn't actually grow up with 8. So I grew up really with 3. And the fifth child, fourth sibling was born when I was a junior in high school. So by the time that he got to any kind of development stage, like I was out of the house, and my parents adopted 4 others from China somewhere between like my senior year of high school and the time that I graduated college. So really I grew up with 4. There are 9 now, and it's almost like there's 2 generations, which is kind of an interesting dynamic. But the biggest thing is that there's no real role model and nobody else's mold to watch and walk into. Now, as the oldest one, you grow up kind of naive in your friend group. And as I'm watching my kids now who are 10, 8, and 5, like the 10-year-old still kind of sort of believes in Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny.
Right.
And the 5-year-old is cursing, right?
Yeah. So as an only child, I had no one to follow either. So I relied on close friends to tell me the hard truths. Right.
Yeah. He lost his tooth a couple of months ago and didn't tell us and put it under his pillow kind of as a test for us. And he woke up the next day and he's like, the tooth fairy is not real. And we said, why? He said, well, because I still have this tooth. Guess you got us. Then we asked him about Santa Claus. He said, what do you think about Santa Claus? He said, no, I still believe in him, right? Because he brings presents.
Right. Yeah. And I'm fine if he's not real, just so long as he continues to bring the presents, right?
As long as the stuff shows up under the tree. Yeah.
Yeah. He's the practical one.
Yeah.
All right. So did you grow up always wanting to be a lawyer, or is that kind of something that you fell into?
Yeah. So I actually don't know the answer to that question. I don't know that I always wanted to, but at the same time, there was nothing else that I ever wanted to do. So like I majored in philosophy in college because my plan was to go to law school, and my thinking was like, what does it matter? Why would I go and learn anything else? Why don't I just learn this stuff that's interesting to me and comes easy to me? And in retrospect, like I should have done hard science or business training in college, but I just never really saw myself doing anything else. And even in law school, like I never really saw myself doing anything other than being in a courtroom. So when I was in law school, I wanted to be either a criminal defense lawyer or a trial lawyer, whatever I thought that meant. And I did criminal defense for a little bit out of law school. And to me, that seemed to be just standing around in a courtroom telling war stories and waiting for your case to be called. So that wasn't terribly appealing to me. And then discovered, of course, the world of contingency fee personal injury cases where, you get to help people against insurance companies, and insurance companies are always trying to take advantage of our clients. But really more than that, like on the business end, the game is to figure out how to position yourself to get the biggest and the best cases and then to run them efficiently, right?
Right.
The greatest thing about our practice is we're never asking anybody to pay us by the hour. And so we don't have to stand there and command any hourly rate. But if you've done a good job of positioning yourself in the marketplace and your team does a good job of running the cases, then you can effectively have a very, very high hourly rate.
Absolutely. And so like me, you never had any kind of business training going all the way up to and through law school. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
And so at what point in time did you start to become interested in kind of the business side of a law practice?
Well, probably in 19 when I started here, right? So as I was an associate and as I was a junior partner, name partner, but non-equity partner at my old firm, I didn't really have anything to do with the business of it, except that, I knew how to generate cases, and I was bonused on a model where if I brought a case in, I kept a good percentage of the money. And so I knew how to go out and find those, but I really didn't know anything about operating costs and, rent and tax benefits of running your own firm or anything like that until I started with my dad and joined him as a partner in 2019. And, I've always just kind of picked stuff up by listening to it, either on podcasts or by reading. And so for me, it was diving into the numbers. What are we paying people? What should we be paying people? What are we paying in rent? And then down to like, okay, what does it actually cost us to run a case? If we ran 100 cases through the firm last year and our expenses in the vertical were $500,000, well, and I can't actually do that math on the fly, although I should be able to.
Pause and calculate it for you?
If we're dividing by 3, I'm good, but dividing by any other number, I can't figure it out.
Right.
But figuring out what the cost to run the case through a firm is, and then figuring out what the cost to acquire it is, either by organic marketing, paying your SEO person, or by pay-per-click, or by what's for us the most costly way to acquire a new client, which is a referral from another lawyer. And then getting into, okay, if I know that my cost to process a case is X, now I know what my profit margin is. And I can influence that profit margin by not taking cases that are below a certain threshold, or not taking cases that might be more difficult or more costly to prosecute and win, right? And so for me, it's always been about like, what levers can I pull inside of the law firm to find more cases, increase the value of the cases, and move the cases through our system more quickly.
So I know a lot of people that listen to this show are outside of the legal industry, but have desires to start their own business. All right. You kind of had a different intro into starting your own business, because you jumped in with your dad and kind of got into that world there, and you had a bit of a mentor. What would you suggest to someone who has the business idea? They think that they have a really solid idea. They've done the research. They've put together a business plan. What would your advice to them be in terms of taking that leap, moving forward with it, or not moving forward with it?
Well, yeah. So it's to start a business is a big thing, right? It can be a service-based business, or you could be selling something.
Right.
And so there's different advice for different kinds of practices or businesses. If I were trying to sell something, right? If I just had lawyers love the term widgets, right? If I were just selling widgets online, I just start, right? I mean, the barrier to entry is fairly low, and registering your LLC, that's not a step, right? Setting up your website on Wix is not a step. The steps are, how can I find the client or client base that I want to sell to, and do they actually want the thing that I want? So there's plenty of ways to test that, either through pay-per-click ads, or through Facebook ads, or even through just running surveys through your own social media networks of your friends of like, hey, would you buy this thing? So I have a friend of mine who's launching an adventure race company, and he sent us a very long email describing the thing, and the various price points that he was looking to sell it at, and trying to get people in who will be ambassadors for you. At 50%, you're going to take a loss on the initial price and the initial revenue from that customer base. But how can you find people that will be evangelists for your product and go out and sell it for you and market it for you? And often that's by giving it away up front. But that's kind of what I would be thinking about if I were starting something brand new, is like all of the little things that people think are steps: registering your business, setting up the website. None of those move you really any closer to the sale. And so your first step is, how can I find my initial herd of customers who will give me feedback on, is this a good product or is it crap? And if it's a good product, can they sell some to their friends, right? Yeah.
And we see that all the time, especially with tech companies. They offer you these lifetime memberships for their product for, insanely low rates, $100 or $200, just to gauge the interest and see if that product is something that people will want to use. And then kind of the other side of that is, please give me feedback. What's working? What's not working? All right. So what about somebody who's looking to get into a service industry, like an attorney or CPA, engineer, something like that?
I think the example that I kind of go to is, if I were at a service industry and I wanted to go and do it on my own, like if I'm an attorney in a business and I want to go start my own firm, or CPA in a firm and I want to go start my own, how do I get from 0 to 1 client? And I would be thinking about, how many clients do I actually need in order to put a roof over my family's heads and put food on the table? And the answer is, it probably, in the outset of your business, it probably is not very many. And so, if it's 1 client or 3 clients or 5, and you can keep expenses low for the first year. And it's really easy now with WeWork or whatever the off brand is,
right.
In your neighborhood. Like, it's really easy to find remote people, to find a remote space to work, and to set up either on Google Drives or somewhere else, an infrastructure that supports the business that just gets you to minimally viable number of customers.
Awesome. All right. You're a big mindset guy, right? We've talked mindset quite a bit. We talk about it quite a bit in the Mastermind group, and we'll circle back around to the Mastermind group too. Mm-hmm. But in terms of starting your own business, or especially for those who have already taken the jump, they're in it, and that initial enthusiasm may be wearing off due to all the long hours and frustrations that come along with it, what tips can you give on mindset?
Yeah. Either you're good enough, either you think you're good enough or you don't, right? And if you don't think that you're good enough to be operating a business, then you should shut it down and you should go and work for somebody else. But if you do think that you're good enough to be operating a profitable business that has employees and has customers, and again, provides for you and your family and your employees' families, then you just have to keep moving through it, right? The book that I've given out and advised people to read more in the past 2 years than any other book is Cam Harold's Vivid Vision. Mm-hmm. And you have to have, at the end of the tunnel of your business building, a vision for what you want it to look like and feel like and do for you. And if you can create a vision that's large enough for yourself and for your employees to believe in, then you can weather any storms that come up and any lags in motivation that come up during the building of the business, right? But if the why isn't great enough, if where you think you're going isn't powerful enough, then yeah, you're going to fail, and you should pack up and go back and work for somebody else. And that's okay. Like, not everybody is an entrepreneur, and it's all right if you're not built to, work for somebody else, and that might not be what's in your vision and in your field of where you want to play. But if it is, you've got to have a powerful and compelling enough vision that is good enough for you to get through the hard times, and also good enough for your family and for the people who are coming with you to get through them as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge point too, Brian, in that I think there's this kind of glorified concept of the entrepreneur, right? And if you're not an entrepreneur, then you're not really doing it right, or you're not really free, or you're not really whatever. But I think there's so many different ways to kind of achieve the lifestyle or the dreams that you want without having to go out and do it all on your own. There's been a huge rise in the term entrepreneur, right? Kind of starting a company from within the company that you're there, and benefiting the company as well as yourself. And I think that is a really solid approach for people who aren't necessarily risk inclined to basically quit their good paying job and go start something brand new. And there's also still, kind of the traditional way of working your way up the ladder. Hey, if that fits you and your personality, then do it. There's no one size fits all here.
Entrepreneurs, there's entrepreneurs, there's solopreneurs. You just have to figure out which of it is the best fit for you. And you've only got to live your life in, I think 3 to 5 year spans, right? So what's right for you in the next 3 to 5 years might not be right in the chapter after that. And so if you have a family and you have kids and you've got a high, an expensive lifestyle, it's probably not the time to go out and start your new business from scratch. But if you don't have any of those things, and you have an inkling that you might want to own a business, and you're 22 to 25, right? Just go start it. The worst thing that happens is it fails and you have to get a job somewhere else. And to your point about freedom, we're all kind of chasing the idea that you're quote free. So I talk a lot on my show about passive income. Well, most of the people that talk about passive income are not actually talking about things that are truly passive.
Right.
They're talking about operating their own business, or they're talking about operating their own real estate, but they're still the ones operating it. And so you're not actually free until you have a business or an investment that's spitting off cash when you're not even doing anything. Right. And that is a long time horizon to get to as an entrepreneur in a startup.
Absolutely. I think, the real estate is super hot right now, especially on podcasts, and everybody wants to get into VRBOs. And you have a beach house that you rent out. It is not passive. Am I right?
Yeah, this summer's been good, knock on wood. But I learned lessons like, hey, you have to what did we do? We have to, it's not defrost. You have antifreeze. You have to drain the outside pipes and pour antifreeze in it. We had a leak the first winter that we owned the unit. Like, oh, there's something, and we wouldn't even have known about it, Scott, if I hadn't hung security cameras on the front and the back of the house. It's not passive, right? But it creates for us a place to go and stay effectively for free on our vacation. So we have my wife's family up there just out of school, just when the kids got out of school. There's incredible tax benefits to it. It's spitting off money, but on Saturday afternoons during the summer, I've still got to be by my phone in case the person that's checking into the rental has some questions about it, or the door lock doesn't open, or whatever. Like, make no mistake, I'm still getting sometimes calls at 10:30 at night on a Tuesday about the unit. So
right. And so once again, kind of going back to our backgrounds, right? Neither of us have much of a business background. What would you suggest in terms of learning materials, right? So we have books, we have mastermind groups, we have just learning from finding a mentor and learning from them. What do you think is the quickest way to get up to speed for somebody who maybe has this great idea but has zero business background?
It's all out there and it's all free, right?
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
so much on podcasts or YouTube or at the library. All the information is out there, right? What's not out there is somebody to hold you accountable to actually doing it. And so that's the role that mentorship or coaching or a mastermind group plays in the education. And I have never been somebody who learned anything from books. Like, it's just not how I retain information. I learn from touching the electric fence, right? But I don't ever touch it in the same place twice, right? I make mistakes and we figure out how to recalibrate, make a different mistake, and then, get a little bit closer to what the right answer is. And so for me, like whatever your niche is, you can really go down the rabbit hole in YouTube or on podcasts or in books and learn and never take any action. But so I would start there, and then I would try to find somebody who's 3 to 5 years ahead of me. And in real estate, that might be like your local real estate meetup. In business, I don't know, like maybe a BNI or somewhere like that, who can guide you on what the first steps ought to be. And if you're in law, if you're in law school and trying to figure out what you want to do, and you email or reach out to 10 lawyers in your town, like at least 3 of them are going to go have lunch with you. Right. And what I've been telling people is the trick with mentors is a mentor's not going to waste his time with somebody that you give advice to, and then they don't do anything. And so it's really important that you show up to whatever the meeting is with a pen and paper, you're taking notes, and then whatever advice they give you, whether you think it's good advice or bad advice or somewhere in between, you have to take action on it if you want to have the second meeting. And then you have to go back and say, thank you for the advice. Here's what I did. Here's the results I had. They were good. Thank you. Or they were bad. Like, did I screw something up, or was the advice not picture perfect for my situation? And so cultivating those relationships with somebody who's just a couple of years ahead of you is, I think, really critical to the early success of whatever the business venture is.
Yeah, a fantastic point. Let's talk mastermind groups. You just moved into a new role over at Great Legal Marketing, and that is the platform where you and I are both in a mastermind group. We've just met a couple weeks ago now. Yeah. What is the benefit, and what takeaways do you typically come away with from those mastermind groups?
The benefit of a mastermind group is that you don't know what you don't know. And so, just the format that we run at Great Legal Marketing, we will have in the room for 2 days, 4 times a year, anywhere from 12 to 20 law firms. And our format is somebody will present for 30 to 45 minutes on what's going right for them, what's going wrong for them, and then something in their business that they want help with. And somebody in that room has probably solved that problem before, whether it's hiring case management software, selecting a website vendor. Somebody in that room has a good recommendation for you, and they're going to tell you the people and the items to stay away from, right?
Yeah.
But Scott, the real magic for me is when somebody says like, hey, I know that you're asking this question, you haven't even thought about this yet. And here's the unlock that's going to save you $50,000 or $70,000 in the future from this thing you haven't even thought about. And so getting into a room with people who are a little bit ahead of you and a little bit behind you, where you can be authentic and vulnerable about the problems that you're having, I think is really powerful. And so here's what I'll say about that is like, you might say, I can just do this on my own with the 5 lawyers in my town. And you can, if they're in different practice areas. I think it's really hard for 5 personal injury lawyers in Dallas or in Fairfax to get in the same room and vulnerably share what's going right for them and what's going wrong for them, because lawyers and business people in general, we're always afraid that somebody else is going to steal from us, right? Because everybody tends to have a little bit of scarcity mindset, and I have it too, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is when you get outside of that and you have people who you're not afraid, like I'm not afraid somebody from Iowa is going to come in and take clients away from me, right? So I can say, here's the strategy that we're implementing on Google, and here's what's really working out very well for us. What else would you do? And I can get good advice on that without the fear that, they're going to be giving clients away to me or I'm going to be taking them from them.
Yeah. And, the number of times when I've sat up there and had that exact thing happen of, hey, you're talking about this, but why? Like, what's the reasoning behind this? And it opens up a completely different thought process. It's simply amazing. It really is like watching magic happen. The other thing is you get up there with a problem, and by the time you spit the problem out, you already know what the answer is. Well, and the whole group knows what the answer is. Yeah. And it makes it for a very short hot seat because everybody's like, yeah, that's not even a problem. You know exactly what to do this. But every single time, what's that?
And if you've done it enough, you sit in your own executive meetings back in your office and you think to yourself, if Scott were presenting this problem, here's the advice that I would give him. Yeah. And then you just go and execute on that. The other thing that I'll say is as small law firm operators, and I'm sure this is true across all industries, none of us have any idea how well we're actually doing against anybody else's measuring stick, right? You don't know how much the guy down the street is doing in revenue. You certainly don't know how much he's doing in profit, even if he's posting, several $100,000 verdicts and settlements on his webpage, every year. Like you have no idea. And this happened in our meeting last time. Like we had a woman get up and present her numbers and say, here's the profit that I'm doing and here's the revenue and I'm disappointed. And the room was like, you're operating at a 45% profit margin. Like in any industry in the world, that's really good. And that doesn't even account for all of the, the personal items that you're probably running through the business, right?
Yes. IRS allowed.
I happen to know they own their business and they're paying themselves rent. And so it's probably even higher than that. But we always feel as though we're spinning our wheels and not getting ahead. And sometimes it takes being in a room and openly sharing those numbers for everybody else to go, you know what, actually, I'll trade you. That one's pretty good.
Yeah. And I think the other piece of magic to the mastermind groups is you're surrounding yourself with people who are truly engaged, truly trying to get better, want to share, right? It's not just about give, or take. It's really everybody there wants to give and wants to provide value, and you leave completely energized. Yeah. You're I don't know about you, but I'm always drained, right? It's just a complete mental drain. It's like being in trial for 2 days. But I'm so energized, and usually that weekend after the mastermind, I don't sleep a whole lot because my mind just won't shut down.
Yeah. So the 2 tricks for me are, number one, I like to stay in the city where I go to a mastermind meeting for an extra day before I come home, because when you get on the plane and you show up back to your family and you show up back to your office, you haven't created for yourself the extra time that it takes to prioritize what are the 1 to 4 things that are really important that I want to implement in in my business going forward. And then the other thing is making sure that you have somebody who's coming with you. So like I call this the number 2 in your business, your marketing director, your junior partner, your operations manager, because as entrepreneurs and as visionaries, like you can come back to your organization and you say, here's the 4 ideas that I want to do. And if you don't have somebody who's your ally, who's alongside you in the building of the business, then your team can go, well, Scott, he comes back from these things with crazy ideas and
Never
he's going
happens.
another one in 3 months and he's going to come back with different ideas. So if we just don't do anything, maybe he'll have better ideas in 3 months. Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to have somebody on your team, and in EOS, we call it the integrator, right? Who helps you marshal the 20 ideas that you come back with into the top 3 or 4 ideas, and then translates to the team. Here's why those things are going to be good for the business and for you employees going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point. I know the team always dreads me coming back from these things because I do. I have the list of ideas and questions to ask, right? And it's that would be very helpful to have a number 2. That's something that I will definitely think about integrating in for next year. So you mentioned EOS. Several of us operate off of EOS. I've had my implementer. I always get implementer and integrator mixed up in my head.
Yeah.
Implementer on
because you're a visionary and you don't worry about the details.
I don't, right? That's why I need an integrator to handle the details for me. Tell us about your journey with EOS, or now multiple journeys with EOS,
Sure.
And why that's a good decision for you and for your firm and for Great Legal Marketing.
Yeah. So EOS, if there are people who are listening who aren't familiar, is a structure and a system for running the organization and the goals and the tasks in your business. And so we, 4.5 years ago in the law firm, hired an implementer to come in and run these meetings for us. And our system with him is it's 5 days a year. It's 3 quarterly meetings, and it's 1 2-day annual meeting that's offsite somewhere. We rent a cabin. Last year we went to a lake, and it was great with our leadership team, spending 48 hours together in an intimate setting, a couple glasses of wine at night, a little kayaking on the lake in the morning, and then hard business from 8:30 to 5:30 both days. Really dials you into, okay, what are the goals that I want to achieve with the firm, and then what are the goals that other people are looking to achieve, both in the firm and in their personal lives, because it's important as owners of the business that we be facilitating the dreams of our employees and the other people on the leadership team. So with that structure, then we also meet without the implementer every single week and go over, okay, here's the things that we said we're going to take care of in the next 90 days. Are they on track? Are they off track? What issues have come up in the business that we need to discuss, make decisions on, and then execute on? And what it has done for us is it's removed Ben and I as the one-off decision makers for everything. Right. So before we were running this, the marketing person would come to my office, and the HR person would come to my office, the associate would come to my office, the receptionist would come to the office and ask things. And now we have what we call an issues list, a place where all those things get trapped. And then we discuss them once a week and we make a decision as a team and we move forward. And so we were talking a little bit about decision fatigue before we got on here. Mm-hmm. And it's removed a lot of the decision fatigue. The other thing that it's done that's been really critical to the business is aligning the right people for the business into the right positions at the business. So EOS calls this right person, right seat. Coming up with what really truly are the core values of your firm or your business, not what are the aspirational things that you write on the wall that sound good, that some consultant came up with, but truly like what qualities do you admire in other people, in your employees, and even, Scott, in like, what kind of clients do you want to work with? What kind of people do you want to have as clients? Sure. And then filtering everybody who's in your organization. And when you get better at it, every vendor who's coming to your organization, and when you're even better at every client, through that decision matrix about, do I want to work with this person or do I not? And I'll tell you, like the first 18 months were really hard because there was a ton of turnover, because we had historically people who'd been here for a long time who, I think we knew in the back of our mind, like, you're not a good fit for this reason or this reason or this reason. We didn't have a good avenue to articulate it. Right. And it was almost never a performance issue. It was a culture fit. And so we had people who left because they didn't fit the culture. We had people who we kicked out because they didn't fit the culture. And then we had people who did fit the culture that were in the wrong position. They were not. So the example that I use is, like, we had an administrative assistant who did not like conflict, right? And so in a position where you're arguing with insurance adjusters and you're trying to get people at doctor's offices to send you medical records, I've got to have somebody who can at least tolerate conflict.
Yes.
But she was culturally a great fit. So we moved her into a position where she could make everybody happy. She's our director of happiness now. Yeah. And that's been a great long-term fit for us.
And I think for me, I always go back to communication. I think EOS, with all of those other things, really boils down to communication, right? Communicating your core values. You got to come up with them first, but then communicating with each other on the issues, and having time to actually work on the business with the leadership team, as well as your sub L10 meetings, kind of down the accountability chart. And that was missing in our firm, right? We were doing a lot of the one-off decisions, and then those decisions weren't being cascaded to everybody else to where they knew what the decision was. And so you're answering the same questions over and over. And to your point, that decision fatigue was just over the top. I got to where I would come home and I couldn't decide, if my wife asked me a question of, hey, would you rather have this or this for dinner? I say, I don't know. Just tell me where to drive. I don't care at this point. I don't want to make any more decisions. So you guys have been running on EOS. So tell me about Great Legal Marketing. You just stepped in as the president over there. Tell us a little bit about that.
We are a coaching and a mindset organization for solo and small law firm owners. And we are for entrepreneurial solo and small law firm owners, right? Some people, most lawyers are not good at running businesses. And so we help you set up your business, not from a structural standpoint, not from a, here's what you should be bringing home and here's, who you should be hiring, but really from a mindset perspective, helping people get alignment on what do I really want my law firm to do for me? Okay. At number one, and then what do I have to do in order to get it into a position to do those things? Like, we have firms all over the spectrum. So we guys that love working 70 hours a week, guys that want to work 25 hours a week. And so we help people get into the right mindset of getting the law firm to fit your personal and your family needs first, and then creating an organization that serves the employees and serves your clients really, really well.
And I know you had mentioned the book Vivid Vision earlier. I assume that's probably going to be on the list of books that I ask you for at the end of the podcast. But for Vivid Vision, you're a huge proponent, as am I, of, hey, what do you want to build? And I think that is missing from so many, especially professional services. Businesses, they just start building, right? Like, hey, I'm just trying to get clients in the door. I'm trying to make a little bit more money. I'm trying to be more profitable. And then all of a sudden they start reaching those goals and they start creating more revenue and they start creating more profit. And then they turn around and they actually look at their business and say, this is not what I want. This is not what I intended to build. I don't like this. I'm not happy. So talk a little bit about creating that vision at the very beginning.
Oh, so how do you craft the vision for what it is that you want? Yeah. So I love doing this. What I did, Scott, is I went to a coffee shop and I just started writing down stuff that I wanted to do, right? Just brain dumping, like, here's what I want to weigh. Here's what I want my body fat to be. Here's the true passive income that I want coming in. Here's how many hours I want to work. Here's, the kinds of cases that I want to work on. And here's stuff that I don't ever want to do again. Right. So for me in the firm, like, I love talking to new clients. I love trying cases, and I hate doing everything in the middle.
Which is quite a bit.
Yeah. It's everything in the middle, right? It's discovery. It's having 17 conversations with a client where the answer is, it depends, because the answer is always, it depends. But, you and I know this, but clients don't do that. They expect us to actually have answers. I'm like, if your doctor doesn't have answers, I don't have answers. So making that list of the things that you do and you don't want to do, and then going back and putting it kind of into a narrative format. Like, here's the things that I want to achieve in the physical aspect of my life. Here's the things that I want my business to do and to look like. And here's what I want to be able to do with my family. And constantly tinkering with that until you've gotten it to a place where, the vision is large enough that you can share it with other people and they would be excited to help you get there. So one of the things that's been surprising to me, I did an episode on my podcast where I just read my vivid vision, and I got a bunch of notes from people saying, I love it. Like, what can I do for you? How can I support it? That's awesome. Because when you tell the universe, and not to get too woo-woo, but when you tell the universe what you want, like the universe starts to conspire to give you that stuff. And then, so this is you're casting a 3-year vision for yourself. And then you want to go back and look at it periodically, right? So the problem with most people in goal setting is we set goals. If we write them down, we then put them in a drawer and we never look at them again. Right. But going back and revisiting and starting to highlight the things that are working out for you, the things that have already happened, and the things that you're either off track or, okay, maybe when I wrote that thing down, I didn't actually care about it as much as I thought that I did. But using that as a measuring stick of how far you've come, again, back to Dan Sullivan's gap in the gain, like how far you've come from where you were when you wrote these things down.
Yeah. And going back to the woo-woo part, it's amazing how when you start putting, for instance, marketing, right? If I start putting really focused energy into marketing, whether it be relationship development or, building more funnels or really focusing on something new to implement, the new business comes. It may not come from specifically what it is that I'm working on, but it comes from somewhere, right? And it happens every single time. If we're having a slower month and I return my focus on marketing and to whatever avenue it is, then the cases start to come. And it may not be through the avenue that I'm focused on, but they just start to come. It's amazing how that happens almost 100% of the time. Yeah.
And to be clear, it's not fake it till you make it, right? It's not. It's not going out as a second-year associate and saying I want to be the greatest brain injury lawyer of all time, but it's putting that into the universe, and then you got to do the work, right?
Right.
All right. If I want to, so for me, I wanted to get out of doing any kind of chiropractor cases. I only want to be focused on brain injury and surgical cases. Okay, cool. So what does my marketing need to look like to attract clients like that? And then what kind of a lawyer do I need to become? What kind of things do I need to study and be able to do in order to support those clients when they get here, right? But to your point about, just going out and willy-nilly trying to increase revenue, there's a million ways to increase revenue. But if you haven't thought about what you want it to look like and what kind of things you want to be working on at the end of the tunnel, then you're gonna end up with exactly that, like all of the little things that you don't actually want to do. And that's a whole different set of problems to solve.
Absolutely. All right, Brian, we are out of time, my friend. A couple of final questions here. Yeah. Give me your top 3 business books and your top 3 outside of business books. It can be fiction or other nonfiction.
Let's see. Top 3 business books. All right. Cameron Herold, Vivid Vision, which is, maybe business, maybe not, but I'm going to count it as business.
And it's all of like 100 pages. It's not very long.
Yeah. Alex Hormozy's Gym Launch Secrets. And not because I'm going to go start a gym or because you should go start a gym, but if you take the marketing principles and the business building principles in that book, and you just like in your mind, if you replace gym with whatever kind of business you are starting, then you have the model for creating an incredible, successful business. And then the other one, I hate to give you 2 Hormozy ones, but $100 Million Offers is really good also. Yeah,
that is a good one.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. What about non-business?
Non-business. So I'll just give you what I'm reading now. I just finished this great book called The Wager. And I can't think of the name of the author, but it's a story of a 17th century British sailing ship that's chasing a Spanish ship around the around Cape Horn, and they shipwreck in Chile. And then 2 years later, 30 guys show up on a life raft and they're heroes. And 3 weeks after that, the other 3 guys show up on a life raft and they have a completely different story about what happened while they were in Chile. It's an incredible, incredible book. And the most incredible thing to me is like these guys, as they're fighting for their lives, dying of scurvy and building shelters on the beach, they're keeping track of everything that happened every single day so that some author in 2021 can regenerate the story. So The Wager is an incredible book. I love Chris McDougall's Born to Run. So we didn't get into it, but I have a history of running ultramarathons, and Born to Run is really what set me down that track, got me away from marathon running and into very, very long stuff. So if you have any interest in endurance races, Born to Run is a great book. And then for pleasure reading, I'm reading this book called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which is a kind of a cool story about a friendship over the course of 30 years as these two people like build a business and design video games together. And if you have any kind of video game interest, it goes way too deep into that. It's a cool book, but it comes to mind just because I'm reading it right now.
Yeah, I'm a huge Tom Clancy fan, both pre and post mortem, and he is famous for going into a little bit too much detail into like the jets or the aircraft carriers or whatever it is that he's talking about. And I'm just like, I don't even know what any of this means, but let's get on with it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We appreciate you as always, and thank you to our sponsor, the Aussie Grind. If you guys are in Frisco, Texas, and are looking for a good cup of coffee, some amazing breakfast, lunch, or dinner, then check them out. And we will see you next time on the Driven Crowd Podcast.